Namaskar, Swagatam, and welcome to the third session and second day of Namaste 2020. Uh, just for those who have not attended our previous sessions, a small introduction to the organizers, the Center for Soft Power, in collaboration with uh, the Indian Cultural ICCR and also S. Vyasa deemed to be university. I must say that it has been a wonderful journey for us at the Center for Soft Power, where we are studying the soft power of India. The soft power term is an accepted term which was coined by Joseph Nye a few decades ago. But to us, soft power is not about wielding some kind of power, but it is more about akarshanam, or bringing close to us, attracting us in a gentle manner, which has been the nature of our country from decades. We attract people. We don't go out and fight with them, or we don't occupy them and make them go according to our rule. This is how it has been. Even the Indian kings that have been in South Asia, if you look at the history of those places, there are a lot of Hindu temples, but the people still followed whatever was their own customs. So this is an initiative of the Center for Soft Power. And the journey has been very nice because we have interviewed a lot of people. We have commentaries. And if you look at our Soft Power mag, you will see the kind of work that we have done. We have interviews, we have interacted with practitioners, we have interacted with promoters, we have commentaries, we have research pieces. And all in all, we have a lot about what our country is. The whole journey has been twofold in that when we have met people from other cultures, what we have found is that underlying humanism that is common to the entire mankind. What we have forgotten is our roots. Our roots and the culture of this country has been one of universality, where we believe that everything in creation is divine. So the world has not been made for the crown of creation man to use, abuse, misuse, or do whatever he wants. Every animal from the amoeba to the elephant or the hippo or the tiger has an equal right to the resources that man enjoys. So I think this pandemic may have taught some of us this lesson that if we live in sync with nature, it is indeed good for us. And with these few words, I would like to welcome Dr. Rupa Vasudevan, Dr. Apar Saoji, and Dr. Jinal Shah to this session, and of course the wonderful audience that we have, the enthusiastic audience from all over the world, some waking up early, some sacrificing on their sleep. I would like to say a few small words about Dr. Rupa Vasudevan. She's an educationist with 21 years in education management. She's the co-founder and chancellor of Bharatiya Engineering, Science and Technology Innovation University, a private university from Andhra Pradesh. She's the former vice chancellor of Rai Tech University. She was the youngest vice chancellor in the country at that time. She's the global chair of World Forum for Education. She's appointed as one of the 10 academicians in the General and Executive Council of Karnataka State Higher Education Council, the apex body of education in the state. She's involved in planning and implementation of ICT, that is Information and Communication Technology, initiatives in association with the government of Karnataka. Other than that, Rupa is a very dear person to me and is always there and ready to help in any which way when we ask her. Welcome, Dr. Rupa. We look forward to your kind words this morning.
Thank you, Vijayalakshmi Akka. You are my mentor, advisor. You've been holding us through the journey of our inception of the university to what we are today. So I'm ever grateful, and I don't know how to give it back in what way. But yes, I thank you a lot for, I thank Srimati Vijayalakshmi Vijaykumarji, who I call Akka, the director of Center for Soft Power, to have given me this wonderful opportunity to speak in Namaste 2020, this global festival of Indian soft power. I also thank the other organizers, the Indic Academy, as well as the Indic Academy to have considered me as a speaker here. Well, my journey with food, I may not be able to contribute a lot to this topic, but my journey with food, diet, nutrition started with Vijay Lakshmi madam. And she was the one who said that the university needs to take some steps to ensure that our heritage food cuisines are conserved. We need to ensure that our children know about the ancestral vessels that they use and the medicinal properties that our diet, our Indian diet, consists of. So we developed this very beautiful workshop called Ahara, which was completely conceptualized and intellectualized by Srimati Vijay Lakshmi Vijay Kumar madam. And she invited some very prominent guests, royalties, Ayurveda experts, yoga experts, 11 speakers in this event, which was organized in Taj. We had about 300 people who were interested, the participants who were interested to know more about the culinary and Ayurveda. So my journey with food culture, heritage cuisine, and the relationship between food, body, and mind started a year ago. This is Ahara for all of you, and this was organized by Center for Soft Power, Indica, and Best Innovation University on the June 6th last year. This was supposed to be released in International Innovation and Creativity Conclave, which Vijay Lakshmi madam could not attend because of some health reasons, and because of which it still awaits release. So I'm going to take some excerpts from these profound experiences that we've had in the workshop, and maybe share a few thoughts on what I believe is food to us, how it affects our mind and body. We all know that food is a basic necessity of our life. And since childhood, especially in India, when we are brought up, we are told about from our dadis, from our mothers, that these little nuskas have turmeric with milk if you have cold. Wash your hands and feet before you sit to eat. Fold your legs while you eat, and try eating not in the dining table. Try eating, on the floor. I believe that there have been so many inputs that they have given all through their life. This is our indigenous traditional knowledge. Every civilization has its own unique cuisine and cooking styles, but India and our civilization goes way back. Now, we believe that it's not only the source of energy or nutrition, it's a source of medicine. It plays a very vital role in the promotion of health and disease prevention. That's how our cuisine has developed over the years. And our ancestors, they knew about the importance of food. They knew its role in human life. And this can be understood if you read our literatures. Again, this was an orientation for me last year when I really heard people speak about it in the conference, and some months before that, when we actually started engaging into discussions on conservation of traditional cuisines, on conservation of food cuisines and cultures from India. The Sanskrit sources of ancient India, they indicate that there have been huge contributions to be in this field, and was called as Pakashastra. And there are several books, they've been written, one of the oldest is the Bhojana Kutuhala. Now, this is the science and art of cooking. India as such is known as a land of taste and traditional foods. I remember one of the participants and speakers in a conference where she was, I think she was from Germany, and she said, I'm a cook now, and I'm a chef now, and I specialize in Indian cuisine, and I have restaurants all across Germany. And she said, the only thing I knew before I met this Indian chef who taught me the real cooking, the real cuisine is, we used to only use pepper and salt in all our food. Now India, right from the beginning, we have something called as a thali, and there are different courses. It's a large tray of food that is served all at once, and course by course we have the meal. Some are sweet, some are mild, some are spicy, some are hot, and they are served, even though it's a huge meal, they are served in such a way that it never impacts the body in a negative way. Now, there are several countless Indian traditional recipes which we have from state to state, from India itself. Now, people speak about conservation of biodiversity, conservation of environment, conservation of natural resources, but I think it's equally important to conserve these traditional recipes, and which is why since last year we have entered into conservational education at our university. We have three major areas that we are concentrating on. One is to do with the earth, the environment, the water, the renewable energy, and the climate change, global warming. We are addressing all these issues. The second is to do with the food cultures, the culinary journey, because this is again extremely important that we conserve the food cultures, our heritage cuisines, and bring in the immunity value that we can receive from our texts in the current context. So we've been, and then we have another area which is to do with indigenous knowledge systems. Under indigenous knowledge systems, we have art, dance forms, archaeology, music, we have agriculture. So as a university, I think we've taken up this conservation education, and food is one of the very important aspects of it. We've started engaging into discussion on global food cultures with our partners under World Forum for Education. Now, all of us speak about wellness. Now, what's wellness? What I learned from the conference last time was wellness happens when we are mindful of what we put into our body, physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. Every person is unique, and each individual absorbs from the external world too. The food, the sounds, the sights, the interactions, and more. And through our Vedic times, I think food has played an important role, not just as delicacies, but also as the purifier of body and Atmana. Now, our texts say that the food we eat is linked to our thoughts, our actions, and thereby our pathway to moksha. So there are three categories of food that I realize is Rajasic, Tamasic, and Sattvic. The Sattvic basically is that kind of food that we need to consume and our texts speak about, which leads to the clarity of mind and physical health. And on regular basis, if these foods are consumed, I think they are, they remove this gross material that we call as, in the gross language, that we call carbohydrate, protein, fats, vitamins, minerals. But the yogic concept of food, it takes into account the total dimension of human existence. And apart from the gross body that we call, we possess prana, mind, intellect, emotions, and the spiritual dimensions. And the sattvic foods lead to clarity of opening up those dimensions. So I think a balanced diet is a diet which we have known from ages to do with the sattvic foods, and only such diets aid in holistic living. So while cooking, even while cooking, the person who cooks, he has a role very significant in what we consume. While cooking, the ancient scholars have advised that the cook should have
Dr. Rupa.
Yes?
Thank you. You have to wind up.
Yeah, I'll just take another half a minute. So even while cooking, the ancient scholars have advised that the cook should have a calm mental state of mind. He should recite slokas, etc. So the quantity, timings, and the quality of course matters to maintain wellness. And I just wanted to repeat that, right from ancient times, we recognized the importance of digestion. We've recognized the importance of what we eat, in the traditional Ayurvedic systems, and thus the ahara, the good food, and included the type of food that the person's thought process, who prepared the food, the time of the consumption of food, and the amount of consumption of it. Now, these are crucial according to me for our well-being and health, and I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot more. This is exactly from what we learned from our ahara that we had last year. So thank you so much, Vijayalakshmi Madam, for this opportunity. And I look forward to the other speakers to give us insights on the food, body, and mind. Thank you so much.
Namaskar, and thank you very much. Would it be okay if Dr. Jinal Shah speaks first and then Dr. Appar Savji? Sir?
I'm okay with it.
All right. Okay. Varsha, then you can introduce Dr. Jinal first.
Yeah. Namaste, one and all. Thank you, Dr. Rupa, for your wonderful insights. It's a pleasure to have you as always. I'm now delighted to introduce our first speaker for today's session on food, body, and mind. So first off, we have Dr. Jinal Shah. Jinal Shah has completed her master's in clinical nutrition and dietetics from SNDT University, Mumbai in 2012. She has trained under and is working with Ms. Dr. Rujuta Divekar as a senior nutritionist since then. She has participated at FENS Nutrition Conference at Dublin, NSCA Fitness Conference at Baltimore, IDEA World Fitness Convention at Las Vegas, and ISENC Sports and Exercise Nutrition at Newcastle, UK in December 2015. We now look forward to hearing your presentation. Over to you, Dr. Jinal.
Hi, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to be part of Namaste 2020. Rujuta also sends her warm regards and love to everyone. And, this is a very, very beautiful initiative. So I'm going to go straight to our topic, which is Eat Local, Think Global. And this for us is the real mantra of good health, because it is deep-rooted in our indigenous food wisdom. To simply put it, in our grandmother's food wisdom. The indigenous food wisdom or our grandmother's food wisdom teaches us that food is a multidisciplinary study. It cannot be viewed from a narrow view of food groups, which is what we've been seeing that has been happening a lot in today's times, looking at foods from just a view of carbohydrate, protein, fats, and calories. And that's not how it works, because food has much more to it than just divisions into food groups. In fact, this whole division of food into food groups is called as nutritionism. Nutritionism is discrimination, just like any other isms, racism, sexism, ageism. So dividing food into these food groups is not what food is. Food is something that needs to be looked from a wider perspective, from a perspective of crop cycle, cuisine, culture, cooking, much more than just food groups. So the right way to look at food is from the view of food systems. Food systems is looking at food from the view that whatever that I'm eating, is this good for my individual health? Is this good for the local economy, which is the farmer? Is this good for the global ecology, which is the environment at large? Something that our grandmothers or our Indian food wisdom has always taught us to eat local, seasonal, and traditional. It's as simple as that. But with confusions regarding food, it's all gotten twisted, and we've completely lost touch with our own culture and cooking. So keeping these food systems in mind, I'm going to share with you actually 5 good habits to achieve optimum health. Because optimum health is exactly what will take us to, our own goals. All of us have different goals of health. Someone weight loss, someone for fat loss, someone wants just, a good physical strength. To achieve all of these in a sustainable manner, where you've lost weight, you've not gained it back in just a few weeks, where you've stayed, where you stay physically active and healthy all throughout your life, you lead a happy and a disease-free life. There are these 5 good habits that we must follow. So habit number 1 is that start your day with either a fresh seasonal local fruit or a handful of nuts. It could be a banana, it could be anything of your choice. It could be soaked almonds. You wake up, peel the skin, and you have it. But don't start your day with tea and coffee. What that does is that, because when you wake up in the morning, you want to have something which will give you quick energy, but not something that will jolt you out of your sleep. And tea and coffee being stimulants, they just give you a sudden jolt. But what eating something like a fresh fruit or a few nuts will do is it will allow the body to get into a zone of like stabilizing blood sugars, of giving you energy, of kickstarting even the process of fat burning. What it also does is, for anybody who has issues of bloating, acidity, indigestion, it ensures that if you start your day with something to eat, it will keep off all of these problems even as the day progresses. The other thing that we must remember is that you limit the number of teas and coffees that you have in a day to maximum 3, not more than that. I feel like right now with this whole situation with the pandemic, and doing things like working from home, or because we were in a lockdown, there are chances that the numbers can go up of the amount of tea and coffee that you have. So you need to be very mindful about it and limit the total number of cups of tea and coffee to max 3 a day. The third thing to remember here is that there are certain rules with tea and coffee. Okay, and the first rule is, of course, the rule itself, which is don't start your day with tea or coffee. The other thing is that do not have it post sunset, because since it's a stimulant, it will come in the way of your sleep, and sleep is very crucial to our overall health and well-being. And the fourth thing that I want to share about tea and coffee is that please have it the way you like it. You don't necessarily need to have things like a detox tea or a green tea, whether it is green, black, white, purple, pink. It all is exactly the same. It works the same way in the body. In fact, what is good is the kind of tea that you like, with your sugar, with your spices, with full fat milk. Have it the way you like it, and not by the way the way it has been sold commercially, because those work really well for people who are selling the tea. But culturally, what you have always had, even coffee for that matter, don't do things like black coffee with a dollop of ghee or with some coconut oil in it. These are all, they come in the category of fads. Do things that you like to do, but ensure that you're not starting your day with tea and coffee, and you're starting your day with either a fresh fruit or a handful of nuts. The second good habit is avoid long gaps in between meals. So what you must do is, because what it ensures is eating at regular intervals, make sure that we receive the optimum delivery of glucose, of energy, of nutrients, of oxygen that the body requires. We all know about this, that food has to be counted as prana and not as calories. And prana is basically the energy that it gives us. And for that, we need to be eating it frequently. So how you can plan it is, we mostly have our breakfast, lunch, and dinner in place. What you need to do is practically fit in a meal between your lunch and dinner. Between your breakfast and lunch first. Those could be things like, in our culture, we have something which is called as sharbat, things that we all love to drink. So every season has its own set of sharbat. So every region also has its own specific sharbat. So there are things like nimbu sharbat, kokam sharbat, bel sharbat, anything that is specific to your region, to your culture, that you have grown up drinking. You can include that between your breakfast and lunch as a meal at about mid-morning, 10, 11 o'clock. And another meal that you can bring in is a meal between your lunch and between your dinner. We all have experienced this, that we feel extremely hungry during this time of 4 and 5, or between 4 and 6 p.m. And that's a very natural response of the body. At that time, a wholesome meal is what needs to be planned for. A wholesome meal, which is something similar to breakfast. It can be things like poha, upma. It can be just a leftover chapati from lunch eaten with some ghee and jaggery. It can be any of our beautiful heritage traditional snack options. A homemade laddu, chivda, chakri, any of these deep fried snacks. But unfortunately, what has happened is that we associate a lot of, fear with all of our own traditional cultural recipes. We feel like, oh, deep frying is really not good. We feel like, the wisdom that we have received from our grandmothers is not cool enough, or is not, optimum enough. It's not adequate. Things that come out of our kitchen are not half as great as what is being sold to us. But that's entirely wrong. We cannot undermine everything that has been passed down to us from generations and generations just because it was passed down to us in our native language and not in English. And unfortunately, we associate English as the language of science. So it's important that we look at it from that much love, respect, value that it deserves, and know that this is time-tested. Oral food wisdom and the Indian food wisdom is time-tested. It has also something that globally the world is adopting. If you just look at turmeric latte, for example. So make sure that you're avoiding long meal gaps between meals. The third very, very important habit, something that our grandmothers have always told us, is that when you eat your food, don't count how much you're eating. But there are these three S's that you must follow so that you know what is the right time to stop eating. The first one is that you sit in one place and eat your food. And in fact, work it sitting cross-legged and eat your food so that there is optimum blood circulation to the gut and to the stomach, and there's better delivery of oxygen and better digestion as a result of that. The second S is senses. Senses is basically that you align all the senses that we have. So we have eyes, ears, nose, your touch and your tongue. So you make sure that you're not watching anything else while you are eating your food. So it's no phone or no TV or no laptop. Nowadays, the thing that deserves maximum of our time and attention, which is our food, gets the least amount of time and attention. We have to remember that food is not meant for entertainment. It is meant for nourishment. The only way that it will nourish us is if we give it the love and compassion and respect that it deserves. So make sure that your eyes are only watching the food that you're eating, that your nose is only smelling the aroma of the food, that your tongue is only tasting the beautiful flavors, your hands are being used to eat your food, so eat with your own fingers and hear your own chewing. So that's what you must do, and make sure that you eat with your own hands. And the third S is that you eat slowly. You chew your food really well, and you make sure that you're not in a hurry to finish food, that food is not a task. And till you don't finish the bite that you have in your mouth, don't put your hand into the plate to make the next bite ready. Give it the time that it deserves. So that's the third good habit that we must work at developing. The fourth habit is that you finish your dinner at least 3 hours before going to bed. Well, that does not mean that you push your bedtime, but what you have to work at doing is that try to eat about 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, because what happens is that in the second half of the day, digestion naturally slows down. And to ensure that we're allowing for optimum digestion, you keep this gap. What you must do for dinner is rice, and something that we have grown up eating. It's the grain that sustains, it's the grain that has a very, very high nutrient value. It's the grain that is given to us as the first thing after we have been weaned off our mother's milk. Every child has been given that after she has been weaned off her mother's milk. But now we have suddenly started to associate a lot of fear with rice, which is our own grain. In fact, India has more than 2,000 varieties of rice. But because of various things that have come from the weight loss and the food industry, we have lost value. I just want to tell you 1, 2 quick important things about rice. One, that it is a grain that we celebrate in various ways. The versatility of rice is beyond, I can't even talk about how versatile it is, but we do know that if it's an occasion, we have rice in the form of like a pulao or a biryani. If you're sick, you want to do rice like a khichdi. If there is a shraddh meal also, there is rice as kheer. So in every form, from our birth till our death, we have rice that is, served to us. So it's very important that we give it that value. For those of you who feel like, oh, rice is all carbs, well, what I want to tell you is that rice is also very rich in what is called as essential amino acids, BCAA, something that the body cannot produce and it's needed from our food, and rice gives us that. It allows us to preserve muscle, and therefore, in fact, it allows the body to actually burn fat and stay fit and lean and healthy. Another thing that it does is that it helps to allow us to clear our bowels very smoothly without too much trouble in the morning. And it also works like a natural de-stressor. So do rice in forms of dal rice, khichdi, pulao, whatever is your traditional way of eating rice as your dinner especially. And the very important thing that you need to add to your rice is at least a teaspoon of ghee. I think ghee is something that, as much as we talk about, is going to be less, but we do understand that now it has become a global superfood. Our grandmothers always told us ki ghee khao geno mat, and there is also a shloka in Sanskrit which says that take a loan but eat ghee. So it's very important that we understand that there's a reason why it's a panchamrit in our culture. The benefits are beyond beyond what I can cover, but something to do with for your hair, for your skin, for good health, for fat burning, for satiety. You know, for all of us who are looking at, we feel like after eating our meals, we don't feel quite satisfied. So the one thing that ghee really gives us is santushti, and something relevant in today's time. It allows the body to assimilate vitamin D3, which has now been very strongly correlated with reduced fatalities and complications to do with COVID. So it definitely has to feature in our diet, a minimum of 1 teaspoon each in your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but surely on top of your rice as dinner. So finish your dinner 3 hours before bedtime and include rice and ghee as part of it. And my last good habit is, to work at building a healthy and a good lifestyle. There are two important things here. Commit to regular exercise. So a good amount is a minimum of 150 minutes per week that you kind of work at in, investing in exercise. Exercise is medicine. It works like medicine without any side effects of medicine is what we must know. It can be anything that you like to do. Yoga, body weight training, or cardio, anything that is of your choice, but invest about 150 minutes a week, which is roughly about 20-25 minutes a day. I'm sure something that we will be able to do. The other thing that is very, very crucial is sleep, which we really do not value anymore. We wake up at random hours, we sleep at random hours. What will help us to stay fit, lean, and disease free, and what is true to our culture, is also having a fixed bedtime and a fixed wake up time. Ideally, there is a hormone called as growth hormone that peaks between 9:30 in the night to about 4:35 in the morning. And this peak is very important to ensure that we lead a healthy and a disease-free life. But the only way this hormone will peak is if you are sleeping. So work at sleeping as close to 9:30, 10 o'clock in the night, and waking up as close to sunrise as possible to enjoy good health. Three very important points here. Make sure that about 30 to 60 minutes before sleeping, you're keeping yourself completely free of all kinds of gadgets. So no phone, TV, laptop, iPad, because any kind of a screen is going to make your body and mind very, very alert. And instead of allowing you to fall asleep, you will just feel very active. The other thing that works beautifully is just having a small cup of haldi milk, with a little bit of soot, and even for anyone who has sleep issues, a pinch of nutmeg powder, something our grandmothers have constantly advocated, just because it wasn't sold to us in a packet and given a very fancy name. But now we all know that turmeric latte or golden milk is something that's sold world over. I feel like it's worth that we go back to our way of having it. So do the haldi milk before sleeping at night. And the last thing that works again really, really well is taking a little bit of ghee and rubbing it on the soles of your feet with your own palm till your palm feels slightly warm. This allows the body to completely unwind and fall asleep, and you'll wake up feeling extremely fresh in the morning. So these are a few good habits that one must work at building. When we talk about exercise, we also need to know that activity is just as important. Since all of us are also working from home right now, we need to know that for every 30 minutes of sitting, stand or walk for 3 minutes, because sitting is the new smoking, so it's also just as harmful. And if you exercise, doesn't mean that you have to just keep sitting. You have to still stay active. They both are very crucial parts of our life. So this is all from me for the food, mind, and body lab. And I feel that, all these three things are directly connected. So if we work at inculcating these 5 good habits, it will take us a long way in ensuring and enjoying a happy and a healthy and a disease-free life. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Apar, also for letting me go first.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jinal. This was truly insightful. I'm sure a lot of our viewers are going to inculcate many of your views today. So now we have Dr. Apar Saurji. Dr. Apar Avinash Saurji has done his doctoral work on the psychophysiology of yogic breathing retention. He currently works at SDRSA as the Deputy Director for the School of Yoga and Naturopathic Medicine. His research interest includes the application of yoga and naturopathy in health and disease and understanding the underlying mechanisms involved. Now we look forward to hearing your presentation. Over to you, Dr. Apar.
Thank you, Varsha. It's actually a little interesting talking after Dr. Rupa and Dr. Jinal has spoken, because they have also covered a lot of points that I wanted to. So But I would rather be limiting my talk to the concepts of food in yoga, which is again a soft power of India that has now become global. And we're talking of the power of the soft powers that we have had. So generally, when we are talking about yoga, people mistakenly look at it as a physical practice, or probably limiting to asana or pranayama or sometimes meditation. But yoga is much beyond that. It is a lifestyle, it is a philosophy, and food is essentially a part of our lifestyle. And therefore, there are a lot of experts that come from yogic wisdom to food. Of course, as old as yoga, probably we have the other civilizations from where the food was considered to be very, very important. And Hippocrates, who's the father of medicine, said, let your food should be your medicine and medicine should be your food. But that concept is not new to us. We do have a lot of expertise on that. And probably again, food is something that has been researched across the world. There are views and counter views. In fact, when Dr. Jinal was talking, I was smiling at myself because there were views where I was fully in agreement with her, but there were some points where I wanted to differ. So definitely there are views and counter views about food, but what is definitely known today is each time you want to eat something, you are either feeding a disease or fighting it. That is the amount of uh, importance food has in health and wellness. Of course, Dr. Jinal also spoke about it. Dr. Rupa also spoke about it. The concepts in modern nutrition, we talk of balanced food, balancing the kind of nutrients that we get, the calories, which is a kind of energy that is required for the fuel for the body. But then these are very reductionist way of looking at food. Food is way beyond these very gross concepts. As again, both my earlier speakers were mentioning, human personality is not just limited to the body, but rather it has the prana, it has the mind, it has the intellect, and the Anandamaya Kosha, the causal state. And food has to be for each one of these layers. And that is where, the Indian wisdom talks about food in a much profound manner. The concept of Panchakosha, as we were talking, the Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya, comes from Taittiriya Upanishad. And it starts with the birth of human being coming from food. It is nourished and sustained by food. And once you are, at the end of your life, you again merge back to the grosser food, basically because your body will get decomposed, merge with the nature again, and to regenerate once again. And therefore, food is considered as greatest of the elements and the supreme medicine. Chandogya Upanishad goes one step further and says it is food that makes your mind. Okay, so what is said in Chandogya Upanishad, I'm just literally translating the shloka from Chandogya Upanishad here. The coarsest part of food we eat passes out as feces, the subtler part becomes the flesh, and the subtlest part of the food becomes the mind. It also says in another shloka that by eating pure food, the mind becomes pure. And therefore, we have these traditional references which are directly talking about how the food that you eat can influence not just your body, not just your weight, and the deficiencies are addressed or anything like that. But we're talking of the mindset getting tuned with yourself when you're eating pure food. Well, from Upanishads to talks about something very interesting. It says, Yatha Pinde Tatha Brahmande, Yatha Brahmande Tatha Pinde. what it means is we are a representation of the entire universe. And the same things that are there in the universe are also present in us. In naturopathy, we understand that very, very simply, you know, the whole world is covered by about 70% of water. Our body also has 70% of water. So there is striking similarities between the entire cosmos, and our body and mind is considered to be a microcosmos. And what is it made up of? It is made up of the sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic qualities. This is again a wisdom that comes from Sankhya philosophy, which is again a precursor to yoga understanding of things. So what we understand is there is sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic, and Dr. Rupa has also mentioned about it. So all of us are a combination of these three qualities. You cannot just be sattvic, you cannot just be rajasic or tamasic. At night you want to sleep, and that is the time that tamas has to take over. You cannot be a sattvic person to sleep. When you want to be active and dynamic, you need to be rajasic, okay? Because you require energy, excitement, all of that. Of course, at the end of it, the sattvic quality has to increase in our lives, which will bring in happiness, wisdom, compassion, a better self-control, better concentration in what we do. And therefore, what we need to understand is, are there people who like these kind of foods? And that is where probably again, I would bring in the wisdom from the Western understanding, which said, you are what you eat. Dr. Victor Lindler, a nutritionist from the West, spoke of that. But again, this book came in 1930s, and what we knew about, you know, what you are what you eat is from Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita very clearly mentions the qualities of an individual that they can possess when they're consuming sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic food. And that is where we talk about sattvic food promoting longevity, health, purity, cheerfulness, the harmony between mind and body. And what is the kind of food that we're talking about here? It is fresh, natural, has natural taste. So although spices are good and you should consume some amount of spices, your food should not become too spicy. Okay, we do also understand the ill effects of excess spices used. Okay, and therefore there has to be a blend of natural taste of the food. It has to be relatively bland. The whole food should be consumed. It should be nourishing to you. It has to be vegetarian and easy to digest. So those are the foods that come in as the sattvic food or promoting sattvic qualities. The rajasic foods are the ones that increase sensuality, aggressiveness, energy, desire, restlessness. And they're typically foods that are spicy, oily, sour, bitter, have excess of taste, pungents and stimulants. Dr. Jinal was just talking about the stimulants that we take in general. And that is exactly what happens when you take a cup of coffee. You may feel sudden rush of energy, but if you take multiple cups of coffee, you will start feeling restless. Okay, and that is typically what rajasic food is all about. And then there is tamasic food, which generally is what I love talking about, because if the concept of food was limited to food giving energy to us and it being the fuel, the heavier meal should make us more energetic. But that's not how it is. The heavy meal that you take makes you lethargic. Okay, and that is the quality that a tamasic person would possess. They are lethargic, they're dull, they're tired. Okay, and that is typically when you eat fermented, overripe, packed, preserved, non-vegetarian food, heavy meals. So all of that put together is what is tamasic food. And therefore, if you want to change your mindset from tamasic to rajasic to sattvic, you can modify your food. And that is where we are talking of modifying the mind by changing our food habits. And therefore, if you want to become sattvic, shift to sattvic food, and that would help you naturally to, switch your mindset as well. Also, there is, I mentioned that, we are part of the macrocosmos, and that is what is represented in us. And Dr. Jinal also spoke about this particular concept that, when you're eating, you should focus all your senses with food. What we do not really understand is the amount of efforts that nature puts in before the food comes in your plate. Okay, there is rains, there is sunlight, it has to be proper season. The farmer has to do a lot of work in terms of making the soil proper, growing the food, and then it has to be harvested, it has to be transported, then it comes to the table. Of course, she also spoke about, Dr. Rupa in fact spoke about the person who's cooking, the mood of that person, and that also gets reflected in the food. And therefore, there is so much more to food than just eating calories that you're consuming. And therefore, when you're consuming food, please think of all these processes that have gone in producing the food that you have got. And that's exactly, again, Bhagavad Gita talks about. This is considered to be a prayer that people chant before they consume food. Brahmarpanam Brahmavihi Brahmagno Brahmana Hutam. Basically, what it talks about is you have the cosmos in you. You are universal soul, the Brahman. And what you're feeding yourself is also Brahman. So with that feeling of offering, the feeling of, prasada, you should be consuming your food. Also, Krishna goes one step further in saying that aham vaishvanara bhutva. So in each one of the individuals, there is every prani, there is vaishvanara, and that is consuming, that is burning the food that you're consuming. And therefore, your food has to become an offering to the Lord, thinking about the amount of efforts that are being brought in for food is very, very important. Very simply put, these days we're talking of eating mindfully, and basically what we're talking about is asking WH questions. Why am I eating? Am I eating because I'm hungry or because I have desire to eat something? Am I eating at right time? Is what I'm eating correct for me or wrong? Am I eating it correctly? Am I rushing into food? How much am I eating? Is it good amount that is required for me? Or, I'm just eating because I like something. And a very important question that we need to answer when we're eating is, where do I invest the energy that I get? Do I invest it in good acts or bad acts? And that is where Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic concepts will also come in play. So how do I eat? We talk of drinking the solids and eating the liquids. Chew your solid food so much that it becomes liquid in your mouth, and have you feel the taste of your liquid so that it remains in your mouth. Of course, I'm not going in the neurophysiology part of it, but there is so much of impact of keeping food in your mouth and feeling the taste and aroma of it, using all your senses for eating food. There will be a huge impact on the way your brain perceives the food. Of course, from Hatha Yoga and otherwise, we get this concept of half the stomach should be filled with solids, 1/4 with liquids, and 1/4 should remain empty. Chaturthamsha Vivarjite is what is being spoken in the concept of Mitahara in Hatha Yoga. Now that is because 1/4, when you not keep your stomach empty, you're basically not allowing the churning to happen in the stomach, and that will lead to indigestion. The other thing that is being spoken, and I touched upon it, is that you should use the food as an offering to God. And again, having prayers before food is a universal practice across religions. And that is because whenever you are having food, you should have a calm, peaceful mind. I'm again not going too much into the neurophysiology part of it, but the autonomic nervous system in our body has two areas, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is having function of resting and digesting, has to be active when we are having food. And if you're stressed out where there is sympathetic nervous system active, you will not be able to digest your food. And therefore, it is very, very important that we pray before we start our food. Yoga is all about mastery over the mind, and typically a mind, whenever we talk of mind, it could be this way. You can either be mindful, being in present and, indulging in whatever is around you, or you can still be in a beautiful place and thinking about multiple things. Food, of course, is a very, very important thing. And therefore, Dr. Jinal spoke about not multitasking when we are having food, because you need to be having all your senses with food when you're consuming it. No multitasking, no using phone, no using gadgets when you're eating, no rushing through food, and again, no binge eating. So all of that is going to be helpful. Another concept that comes in from the apatya that has been spoken in Hatha Yoga is atyahara should be avoided. Not eating too much is very important. And that is again something to do with the yamas that we're talking about in terms of the aparigraha, not indulging too much into your sense organs. Of course, the food has to satisfy your sense organs, but a lot of times we forget that there is a point of satisfaction, and therefore the problems will arise for everything else. The ice cream cannot be felt beyond 1.5 inches of the tongue, and unfortunately, how long do we keep the ice cream on a tongue? Hardly a few seconds, or not even a few seconds. So once you start gulping things, that becomes bad for you. And therefore, keep your food on your tongue as long as you can, and that will give you satisfaction. So some good habits that you can cultivate whenever you are having food: don't be in hurry, pray before you eat, feel the taste of the food. So with all your sense organs, you should be eating food. You can use soft, relaxing music that will add to the parasympathetic tone that we were talking about. Do not do multitasking. Sit on a table, meaning sit down and eat. Okay, I'm not saying dining table or sitting on the floor. Of course, sitting on the floor is going to be the best thing, and Dr. Jinal has just told us why. Whenever you are cross-legged, the circulation to your lower limbs is reduced, and that would help to divert the blood circulation to the digestive organs and help you to digest things better. Please respect your body and health when you're consuming food. Cook and eat in good mood, and eat your favorite food at the end. And that is because generally the favorite food is an unhealthy one. Okay, so if you're eating it earlier, you will end up eating it a lot, and that will be a problem. Second is, when you're eating your favorite food at the end, you will finish your food satisfied, and therefore eat your favorite food at the end. Now, what do we eat? There are some key concepts that come from Hatha Yoga, which is conducive foods. Good grains: wheat, rice, barley, milk, ghee, brown sugar, sugar candy, honey. So all these, and fruits and vegetables, pulses, and pure water should be taken, is what is being spoken in Hatha Yoga. They should also be taking nourishing and sweet food mixed with ghee and milk, which nourish the dhatus. Ayurveda talks about the sapta dhatus, the basic body constituents. So the food that you're consuming should also be nourishing all those dhatus, and it should be pleasing and suitable. And that is the way we take food. So what do we eat? I think a couple of things that were again brought in by my previous speakers was seasonal and regional food. Eat what is in your region. Your traditional concepts of food is very, very important. Probably what your dadis and nanis told you to eat is the best food for you. Okay. Least processed food is another thing that we're talking about. As natural as you can eat a food, that is going to be good for you. Balanced food is, of course, a newer concept that we're talking about. Vegetarian food, and I have already covered the sattvic food. So the last part of what I'm going to talk now is we keep talking about the vegetarian food in yoga and how it is important. And therefore, I just wanted to touch upon a few slides on that. So if you look at human biology, the structure of the jaw, the teeth, the nails, digestive enzymes, the length of intestines, all of that would match the herbivorous animals than the carnivorous animals. And therefore, biologically, we are not meant to consume non-vegetarian food. Of course, there are moral and ethical issues. Of course, we're talking of the medical issues that are associated with meat today. In yoga, we have a yama called as ahimsa. We should be following that. And of course, the medical issues that we talk about today with poultry and dairy is hygiene. A lot of hormones are being given, the antibiotics that are being fed to the poultry and dairy industry. And there is antimicrobial resistance, which is a big problem today. So there are a lot of health issues that are associated with non-vegetarian food. Of course, the research in recent times is also telling us that vegetarians live longer, they live healthier, they have lesser risk of obesity, diabetes, and metabolic syndromes like heart diseases. So already there is a good amount of research that has happened on consuming vegetarian food, making you healthier. A lot of times when I talk of that, people say, vegetarians lack powers or abilities. People cannot, perform well if they're lacking on nutrients when they consume vegetarian or vegan food. We have some people over there on the slide who are either vegetarians or vegans, and they're at best of what they do. Okay, whether it is Narendra Modi ji, whether it is Virat Kohli, who has been at peak of his career in last 3 years that he has turned a vegetarian. Djokovic, the world number 1 in tennis, Serena and Venus Williams, again, world number 1 in tennis. These are vegetarians and they have been at peak of what they do. Of course, Amitabh Bachchan and Lewis Hamilton in Formula One. So these are people from all walks of life requiring different sets of abilities to carry out their work. And traditionally, we have been eating the vegetarian food, which is good for not just body, but also for the mind. And therefore, there should not be any doubt in, taking up the vegetarian food for health. I would probably end with this, that yoga is a lifestyle, okay, which includes the ahara, the vihara, also the thought process, okay. And once you include the moderation in all these levels, whether it is ahara or recreation or balance in work and sleep and all of that, it is going to help you to remove the sorrows. And therefore, food should become part of this moderate lifestyle. Please understand that we're talking of superfoods and something is good for you and bad for you and all of that. But in a lot of local languages, what we understand is if sugarcane is sweet, you don't really eat it from the root. Okay, so you don't have to do excess for something that is good. Something that is good also becomes bad when it is taken in excess. The same rule has to apply in food as well. Okay. And therefore, there has to be a moderation in what we consume and the way we bring the entire lifestyle in picture. With that, I think I've come to the end of my talk. Thank you, Namaste 2020, for giving me an opportunity to share my views on something that I'm really passionate about. Thank you so much, Vijayalakshmi ma'am. I think I'm at the end of my presentation, and if there are any questions, we will take them.
Namaskar, and thank you, Dr. Jinal Shah, Dr. Rupa Vasudevan, and Dr. Appa Saoji. Since we seem to have run out of time and our next speaker is already there, what we could do is we will send you the questions on email. We will make that into an interview and we'll put that out on our soft power mag. So participants, we're really sorry if we can't take the questions now. I think we should start making our sessions much longer because there is so much to share that it becomes very difficult to condense it. I know everybody says, oh, in TED Talks, they do it in 18 minutes. But yeah, we really want this to sink in. But I guess for our next, this is what we'll do. Maybe we should have a half-day seminar on this right after our festival. So all the participants who are here now, I thank you very much. And please stay for the next session. And thank you, the ones who spoke at this panel. It was really enlightening. And yes, I remember my mother always saying that if you're not in a good mood, don't enter the kitchen to cook. So that's, these are small things that, have come down to us. And I think we should learn those things and see that we keep it and take it forward. And I always believe that home cook is more important than the commercial food because the heart and soul goes into home cooked food versus, commercial is just an act of making money unless there is a situation where, the cooks are different. So thank you very much.